here to introduce it is Tara McPherson. And thank you again for coming to the conference. And those of you who need to get a ride back, please come and let me know when the session is over, okay? Thank you.
Hi, I want to welcome everybody, and I'm sorry I've missed the day earlier. I had a 5 seminar, but I hear it's been very interesting. We've lost a panelist, Rudy Busto, who's not going to be here today, but we're going to start with Lanita Jacobs-Huey, who I think is listed as third in the program. Lanita is one of my colleagues here and an associate professor in the Department of Anthropology and in USC's relatively newly departmentized American Studies and Ethnicity division. It used to be a program. And it alone has transformed USC in the last few years. It's been a really amazing addition to USC. And Lanita is, as I said, an associate professor, and her book, From the Kitchen to the Parlor, Language is Becoming an African American Women's Hair Care, is a great read. So I encourage you to look at it. And Lanita's going to go first, and we'll save questions for after the response.
All right. I'm getting myself a stopwatch together so I can be on time.
I'm told I can give you 20 minutes.
Okay, that's what I'm shooting for. I appreciate that. Okay. Talking about Joan of Arcadia, which many of us had the privilege of watching during the last time we were together 2 years ago. And I simply don't have enough time to sing its praises. I was very much a fan of the show. I ducked under my desk with the DVD set and a flashlight and a pen and a pad, and I don't know, it was just transformative. I don't know if anybody else had so much pleasure watching a show. And I'm actually going to use my time to point out some of the show's limitations around representations of race. So Joan of Arcadia was on CBS for I guess 2 short years, and it centered around Joan Girardi, who's played by Amber Tamblyn. She's a modern-day Joan of Arc and self-described sub-defective at her cliquish high school. Her daily conversations with the tangible, chameleonish God, spanning various ages, genders, professions, and ethnicities, and even sexual orientations, resonated deeply with me. But it was Joan's brother, Kevin, played by Jason Ritter, who intrigued me the most. Kevin's high school athletic career is cut short after a car accident renders him a paraplegic, and Kevin's attempts to reconcile his old and new selves were especially vivid and renewed my appreciation for the tremendous work of recovery. Now, Jane and Diane will tell you that I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what I was going to write. I spent too much time thinking about Kevin and the work that he did on the boat in the basement. He was like a contemporary Noah. And then I went from there to think about him using humor as a coping resource and how his humor evolved. But they were able to see my most impassioned remarks lay in the margins of these drafts that I would send to them. And they centered around how Kevin, played by Jason Ritter, his father, and Arcadia Police Chief Will, played by Joe Montagna, and Sister Joan were incessantly framed as good whites within racially charged plot lines, including non-white supporting cast members that seemed to occupy scenes only to highlight the Girardis' good intentions. Thus, the key concern for me in critiquing the show became fairness and accountability concerning matters of race. My critique concerns the show's use of the BBF, the Best Black Friend. Los Angeles Times writer Greg Braxton describes BBFs in a clever play on grade school BFFs, best friends forever, right? BBFs are often played by gorgeous, independent, successful, and loyal African-American actresses whose character's primary function is to support the heroine, often with sass, attitude, and a salty but wise insight into relationships and life. Often this character helps to humanize and nuance white, often female or gay male characters to the detriment of her fuller development. Some have said the same about blacks as deities. Insofar as these characters exploit the mysticism, and in some cases even a kind of the marginalization of African diasporic religious practices. And I couldn't help but think about that when I saw the Lost Clip, or when I think about The Matrix, or when I think about Touched by an Angel. So a significant character in this regard for Kevin is Rebecca Askew, who's played by Sydney Timea Portier, an African-American woman who serves as Kevin's editor and boss at the Arcadia Herald, as well as his short-lived romantic interest. Admittedly, Rebecca's romantic involvement with Kevin means that her character is not entirely commensurate with this archetype of the BBF. Kevin is a heterosexual man, and Rebecca becomes much more than a friend to Kevin over the course of their relationship. Nevertheless, by the time she exits the show in the first season, Rebecca is less a character in her own right than a point of reference that helps to define Kevin's moral evolution. The use of secondary black characters to nurture the growth of whites at the center of primetime television dramas is one of the more subtle conventions shaping the representation of race in popular culture. Televised depiction of friendly interaction between blacks and whites might appear to be taking risks in the ongoing national conversations about race, but when the roundness of black characters is diminished across subsequent episodes, the result is a reiteration of the two-dimensional portrait of blacks offered by the myth of white normativity. Accordingly, although Rebecca is not a stock BBF, her character's complexity and promise are squandered over several episodes, and at best she becomes a positive foil for Kevin and his father Will, insofar as she shores up their good intentions and morality and serves, much like Kevin's accident did, to bring his family closer together as they corroborate some of her more positive assessments of Will eventually. So Kevin meets Rebecca because she offers him a job. But one of the things I appreciate about the show is its rigor. And it's exemplified by the fact that Rebecca's blessed bestowal of a job is not without its complications for Kevin. And several of these complications bring matters of race, disability, and relative privilege center stage. So here is what happens during Kevin's first day at work. He goes in search of Rebecca and overhears her in the break room talking with Andy Reese, the newspaper's obnoxious style editor. And their conversation concerns Kevin's hiring and his perceived limitations as a fact checker. It is not inspiring. It is not flattering, rather. So let's see what happens as this loads.
Anybody seen Rebecca? Boy doesn't know a hoodie from a punch show. Girl from the other day that knew you was Chinese food. I said, oh, sure. You get into a restaurant run by Jimmy Choo. You believe me? I don't get that joke. Well, you're not fact-checking my articles, are you? Look, you may be accused of tickle the elbow bits on your team, so I get no benefits from browsing. That is not why I hired him. Oh, please, Rebecca, I know you. You ain't Dick Cheney on anything. You hired him for the gimmick ones. That's not true. Okay, it is partly true. We get a break from the government on him, and I figure where else are we going to find a young, smart guy who is cheap and willing to sit at the desk all day? All of which would make perfect sense if you could only spell his name.
Okay, so this happens, he overhears it, here's a fallout later in the day.
It's late, you should go home. Not finished. You did pretty well today. You may have a future in this. Oh, it's Friday night. Go have some fun. I really want to finish. Why? Because I'm not coming back on Monday. What? Let's just say it's a guilt thing. Andy is a pissy queen. How good we've all got nicknames. Serious. Affirmative action figure. When I first started as copy editor, I heard it in the hallways. I cried every night. But in here, I was all business, and I made sure that I was indispensable. What a heartwarming story. Be sure to tell all my crip pals. I know what your problem is. But it's my pride. You still identify with who you used to be. Able-bodied, handsome, white man in America. Everything was coming your way. Well, now it's going to be a little bit of a struggle. You're going to have to pick your battles. Wow. One day you're going to remember me as maybe the first person who refused to pity you.
I'm going to pause that. Okay, this scene gripped me. I was under my desk and I said, what, really? Did they just attempt to square disability with racial marginalization? Did Rebecca just confront Kevin's sense of privilege as a white male despite his disability?